One of the things that made the Black Muslim movement grow was its emphasis upon things African. This was the secret to the growth of the Black Muslim movement. African blood, African origin, African culture, African ties. And you'd be surprised. We discovered that deep within the subconscious of the black man in this country, he's still more African than he is American. He thinks that he's more American than African because the man is jiving him and the man is brainwashing him every day, telling him, you're an American, you're an American. Man, how could you think you're an American and you haven't ever had any kind of American treat over here? You have never. 10 men can be sitting at a table eating, dining. And I can come and sit down where they're dining. They're dining. I got a plate in front of me, but nothing is on it. Because all of us sitting at the same table are all of us diners. I'm not a diner until you let me dine. Then I become a diner. Just being at the table with others who are dining doesn't make me a diner. And this is what you got to get in your head here in this country. Just because you're in this country doesn't make you an American. No, you got to go farther than that before you can become an American. You got to enjoy the fruits of them. You've enjoyed the thistles, but you have not enjoyed the fruits. No, sir. So I point these things out, brothers and sisters, so that you and I will know the importance in 1965 of being in complete unity with each other, harmony with each other, and not letting the man maneuver us into fighting one another. I say that again, that I'm not a racist. I don't believe in any form of segregation or anything like that. I'm for the brotherhood of everybody, but I don't believe in forcing brotherhood upon people who don't want it. As long as we practice brotherhood among ourselves, and then others who want to practice brotherhood with us, we practice it with them also. We're for that. But I don't think that we should run around trying to love somebody who doesn't love us. Thank you.
Hello, greetings, welcome, happy Sunday. So happy to have all of you here today on this Sunday. And this is our 23rd consecutive week of doing these 1-hour Sunday seminars, but this is the special day for me. And the reason why it's special is because Shakur and I do these seminars together, you all, as you know. And today is the first day that we're actually able to do one in the same physical location. So I'm so glad to be sitting here with her. How are you doing, Shakura? What's going on?
I'm doing great. It's so great to see you,
It's
Daddy.
good to see you too. Glad to be here with you. So I drove 30 hours to get here, and I'm glad to be here. And we're glad to bring you this wonderful topic today, how Obama blew out Africa's bright light, Libya. But first, we always start by acknowledging that this land does belong to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. There's a lot of talk about looting. So we just want to remind you that the original looters are the people who stole this country in this hemisphere. So it starts from there. So when you talk about looting, that should be the image that comes in your mind, this entire hemisphere being looted. Shouldn't be one person grabbing a television set. That's not looting. Looting is stealing an entire land base, stealing millions of people. That's looting. So we acknowledge that, and we want the indigenous people to have their just self-determination and get their land back. And we also have to acknowledge our ancestors, our wonderful African ancestors, who of course are the reason that we live and breathe today. So we're forever and eternally grateful to them for their conscious struggle to bring us justice and to bring us along. So we're thankful to them. And I'm thankful to have made it here safely and here with my wonderful daughter and her wonderful new puppy, which at this stage is the closest thing I have to a grandchild. So I'm very excited to be here spending this time. And so we're gonna talk about a serious topic, but we're gonna enjoy ourselves as well, because nothing is promised to us, right? And we're just so thankful that we have the time that we have. So glad you all are here, and we will get started. First, as always, we always, just want to remind you who we are. My name again is Ajamu, and I am an organizer for the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And we are an independent Pan-African political party. We'll talk about that in a second. But also, as I mentioned, Shakura is here. My daughter, my wonderful, amazing daughter. What's up, Shakura?
Hey!
And she is working on her doctorate degree in communication. She's teaching classes of undergraduate students, trying to help them learn how to critically think, because, this is not the basis of how school functions today. It's really not the environment where people are actually learning how to critically think. It's more like you just go and regurgitate things and get a receipt. So she's trying to do her absolute best to change that. So we're thankful for that. And then also, again, for the All African People's Revolutionary Party, our objective is Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. We believe that that is the solution. As Kwame Nkrumah, the author of the book you see here, Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, as he stated in this classic work, until Africa is free, no African anywhere can be free. And of course, we cannot have freedom under this capitalist system, because this is the reason why we're in this situation. So we have to change this. That's what revolution is uncompromising change. And so our change is one unified socialist Africa. And it's not just an idea in our head. If you look at the logos of all of these organizations here, these organizations represent millions of people on the African continent, literally millions of people. The PAIGC is a party in government in Guinea-Bissau. So millions of people. All of these organizations have the same objective that we do, as in achieving one unified socialist Africa. And so, this is consequently how we will achieve our liberation and justice. And there are white supremacists trying to get in on Zoom, but they will be unsuccessful. So we will continue on. And so this is what we're trying to do, and work with other liberation movements that are working for their liberation as well, and us supporting that process. And so that's kind of just describes who we are and what we're doing. And so with that, I'm gonna, instead of turning it over virtually, I'm gonna pass the computer to Shakura, and she's gonna get us started.
Okay, greetings everyone. Thank you again for joining us on this Sunday afternoon. I hope that you all continue to hang in there and be safe as we celebrate, you said 25th week?
23rd.
23rd, that is outstanding. Thank you all so much for being with us and for hanging in there for 23 weeks. That's awesome. So the basis of today's presentation is to destroy the myth that suggests that the masses of African people worldwide should emulate and admire the experience of Barack Obama becoming the first 44th president of the U.S. empire. The basis of this logic is that his individual advancement to that position within the capitalist system is supposed to represent a collective accomplishment by the masses of Africans, hence why I said first. His position represents only one thing, that the capitalist, imperialist, bourgeoisie empire is capable to expanding and developing spokespeople who can physically represent every demographic to advance the interests of imperialism. Minister Louis Farrakhan was correct when he said anyone who becomes president of the US has a responsibility to uphold white supremacy. This is true despite whatever emotional appeals their presence presents for some of us. Beyond the symbolic appearance of Obama, his wife and daughters occupying the seat of power within the largest bourgeoisie power center on earth, the truth is, to those educated on world history, his existence can never not include his contributions to mass incarceration, police terrorism against the African masses, institutionalized oppression against African and other colonized women, and the absolute demolition of the Libyan system, which gave hope to all of Africa and all of the oppressed world. We understand the emotional attachment Africans have to Obama. Just 15 years ago, the question of an African president of the US empire was still being utilized as a joke by stand-up comics like Cedric the Entertainer and Mike Epps. The dominance of white supremacists and capitalist values is so unchallenged in this society that colonized people, whether we want to admit it or not, as well as European people, evaluate things based on the capitalist system. In other words, the degree to which we respect something is based upon how the capitalist system sees such a thing. If the system acknowledges and respects it, then we acknowledge and respect it. If the system doesn't recognize something to us, it must not have adequate value. Under this dysfunction, any African who does something like rise to president to this empire is going to garner the attention to this system and thus to us. That means this is the most important thing we have going on with us. The healthy truth is no free thinking and acting people, can ever evaluate their existence based upon the values imposed by the system oppressing them. A free people have to develop their own values, and they have to rise up against those values independent of what the capitalist system is telling them. This adulation of Obama is primarily based on this dysfunction, not on any sober analysis of what's best for African people everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakura. And so I'm playing with my daughter's 7-month-old, my grandchild here. That's why you hear barking in the background. So, you know, the animals, they understand what's happening to the earth better than most of us. So, you know, when they speak, it's a good idea to listen to them. So she's expressing her concerns. But as Shakur stated, like, we want to talk a little bit about the Libyan Jamihiriya and what that was, because what we find is that most people don't really have a clue, you know, what was happening in Libya before it was destroyed. So we want to talk about that and give it some context. Okay, so just the basic history of it, you all, is that the Libyan Jamihiriya, when the Jamihiriya is Arabic for historical and uncountable, meaning, you know, unchallenged, like something that's never been done before. And it was founded on September 1st, 1969. And it happened through a coup d'etat that was led by a junior military officer named Muammar Gaddafi. And Gaddafi came from the Bedouin desert region of Libya. And that's the poorest region of the country pre-Gaddafi, pre-Libyan Jamihiriya. And the distinction about the Bedouin desert area is that it's the area where most of the what you would call Black Libyans live. And so that's where Gaddafi is from. He's from the poorest part, the blackest part. And for the 42 years that he was in a position of leadership in Libya, it was that element of the country that provided the basis of his support. As it always is with revolutions, it's the people who are the most oppressed who provide the basis of support for the revolution. So when there's a revolution and the people who are against it are petty bourgeoisie or bourgeoisie, meaning people who have privilege in the society, those aren't the people you should be listening to, because their lives are not the lives that are the most impacted by the change. So like if you have the situation in Venezuela, for example, today, where, you know, only people people tell me all the time, well, my friends are from, these are bourgeois people. Well, of course they're against revolution, because what revolution does is it takes what they got that they shouldn't have gotten in the first place because the system was unfair and inequitable, and it provides opportunities for the people who have been denied opportunities. Well, of course, they're not going to like that. Just like people here. What's happening in this country right now? The people who have privilege are the ones who are the most strident against any kind of change, because that doesn't benefit them personally. And for them, the whole world is based on and judged on what benefits them personally. So if you want to understand revolution and you're talking to Trump supporters, for example, you're never going to understand revolution, because those are the people who don't, you got to talk to the people on the bottom of society. So this was the case in Libya. And that's why, again, it's important to understand that Gaddafi came from the hood. He came from the streets. He came from the desert in Libya. And so his uprising that was successful on September 1st, 1969, was very popular with the masses of people in Libya when it happened. And when the Libyan Jamihiriya came to power, the Libyan government sought to institute socialist principles in their society that were guided by the Green Book, which is the book of ideas behind the Libyan Jamihiriya, which Gaddafi wrote. And, we read that book multiple times in our All African People's Revolutionary Party work study process. I encourage you to read it. I mean, if you really want to understand Libya, you have to read the Green Book. That's just, you can't, people always want to argue with me about Libya. And I'm like, so what did you think of the Green Book? And they haven't read it. Well, I'm like, well, then you read it and then come back and talk to me. Like, I mean, it's very important to understand the principles from which they based the actions they engaged in. And so if you read the Green Book, what you'll find out is that Libya was concerned about the crisis under King Idris, who was the ruler in Libya before the September 1st, 1969 uprising. And King Idris was a puppet of the US. And what King Idris did was make Libya basically an oil distribution center for Chevron. And as is the case throughout all of Africa, the natural resources are used and dominated by the multinational corporations, and the masses of people get nothing and are poor. And so this is why there was certainly this popular support for the Libyan Arab Jamahiriya when they came to power in 1969. They ran out Chevron out of Libya. They ran King Idris out. And so from day one, that meant, of course, the US was going to be diametrically opposed to the Libyan Jamahiriya because they sabotaged their economic interests there in that region. So they started with that. But the Libyan government did a number of things, like they provided money to new families so they could have people were poor in the country. As I said, the oil wealth is the wealth of the country, but that wealth was utilized by Chevron. It wasn't utilized for the masses of people. So what Libya did was nationalize. When you hear that term, they nationalized. What that means is simply that they took the oil resources from Chevron and used them for the masses of people. So if you're a young couple, for example, in Libya, you got married, you were given a stipend, the equivalent of approximately 50,000 US dollars to start your life together. That's a way to start your life together. Here, this capitalist government, there's a 6-month pandemic. You got $1,200 if you're lucky. I didn't get that much, and most people didn't. You got $1,200. Well, the Libyan Jamahiriya gave you $50,000 to start your family. Healthcare was free. Education was free. All of these things that are, hallmarks of a developing socialist society happened in Libya. In Libya, the Libyan Jamahiriya was not committed to a particular religious faith. There are people there who are Muslims, there are people there who are Christians, people who are atheists, and you were not, prompted to join any type of particular faith. And so that was kind of the basis of how they started in 1969. And obviously, because of that, like I said, they became immediate enemies of the US. And not only that, but the Jamahiriya actively supported liberation movements throughout the African continent and the world. They were very active in supporting Palestinian self-determination formations, for example. And they supported the African National Congress, Nelson Mandela and Winnie Mandela's organization in Azania, or what you call South Africa. We've said many times, Azania is Zulu, means land of the Black people. And that's what African people call what you call South Africa. So we call it Azania. So they supported the African National Congress and the Pan-Africanist Congress, which again is one of the organizations I mentioned that we unite with, that has an objective of one unified socialist Africa, and all types of liberation movements. ZAPO, the Azanian People's Organization, which is another one of our sister parties. And Libya actively supported these organizations in terms of providing resources, financial resources, training. They were, at that time, the late 60s, early 70s, they were one of the very few organizations in the world who provided support for those organizations. Like the way history is given to us in a revisionist sense by the capitalist system, like a lot of people get confused today. People think because Nelson Mandela is viewed with such adulation today that it was always like that. And people don't study the history, and they don't understand that George Bush was the CIA director, what you call criminal, Central Intelligence Agency, what we call Criminals in Action, CIA. He was the Criminals in Action director in 1962 when Nelson Mandela was arrested. And Nelson Mandela, and it was from a tip from the CIA that the racist apartheid regime in Azania, South Africa, knew where to find Nelson Mandela. So this was the work of George Bush Sr. And so then Mandela was taken into custody. Mangaliso Sobukwe, the leader of the Pan-Africanist Congress, was taken into custody. They were both in prison in Robben Island there in Azania. And as you know, Mandela was in prison there 27 years. But back in that time, Mandela was seen as a terrorist. He wasn't seen the way you've been taught to see him today by the capitalist media, who developed a rapprochement with Mandela after he got out of prison. But that's an entirely different seminar. So because he was seen as a terrorist and the ANC was seen as a terrorist organization, this was the basis from how Gaddafi and the Libyan Jamihiriya was viewed, because they were one of, I mentioned, the few sources in the world who were providing active support. And at that time, the ANC, the African National Congress, Mandela's organization, had an armed wing, Umkhonto Nzizwe, which means Spirit of the Nation, and they were engaging in armed struggle against the racist apartheid regime. So Gaddafi, that's why they viewed him as a terrorist. It's important you understand that. It wasn't because of anything that actually happened at that time. It was because he opposed the interests of the United States of America. And anybody that opposes the interests of this capitalist empire is going to be seen as a terrorist. Now, there are some of them who are terrorists, but most of them are not. Most of them are freedom fighters. And they're engaging in activities designed to liberate their people from oppression. And, you know, because most people here are just conditioned to think the way this system wants you to think, it's difficult for people to understand that. But I would just give you this to help you understand it. This country supposedly had a revolution that was won in 1776, right? The Declaration of Independence, right? The US was 13 colonies that were colonized by who? Britain. And Britain was in control of these 13 colonies. And these 13 colonies organized and fought a revolutionary war to get liberation from Britain. That's why this country is no longer a colony of Britain, right? Everybody knows, we all got taught that in school. But if you think about it, if you would have talked to Britain in 1776, they would have said George Washington, Pat Henry, all of them were terrorists. So this question of calling people terrorists, it depends on what your interest is and what your position is in the fight. You know, so when they labeled Gaddafi a terrorist, it wasn't based on the fact of, you know, any brutality against the Libyan people. It wasn't, when they labeled him a dictator, it wasn't based on him stealing what resources in Libya did he steal? The primary product that Libya produced, as we mentioned, is oil. There were no, even the US, Gaddafi's primary enemy, has never claimed that Gaddafi had bank accounts in Switzerland or anything of that sort. He wasn't stealing a dime. He lived in a tent, in fact. And I actually have a picture of Gaddafi in Tripoli where he's walking down the street without bodyguards. He's about 200 feet from where I was. So that's not a dictator, you all. That's somebody who enjoys popular support. Obama couldn't walk down the street without bodyguards. Trump couldn't walk down the street without bodyguards. So just, a little analysis to help people understand, like, whenever they, as Malcolm X said to us, whoever they call the enemy, that's the one you should get close to. And whoever they're close to, that's who you should get far away from. So Libya, again, provided active support to our liberation movements. And not only just in Africa, they did that for liberation movements here. In 1973, Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Nation of Islam, the longtime leader of the Nation of Islam, Gaddafi loaned him $5 million to help build the Nation of Islam. They were trying to get farmland in the South at the time. At least that's what they were saying they were trying to do. And then in 1985, Gaddafi loaned another $5 million to Louis Farrakhan for the Nation of Islam. And in 1985, Gaddafi went on the Nation of Islam. If you know anything about them, they have an annual event every year in February called Savior's Day. It's their day to honor their founder, Master Farad Muhammad, who was born, who came, or at least appeared, on July 4th, 1930, if you know Nation of Islam history. And you should know it. If you have a position about them, if you think that they're terrible, you should know their history better than I'm articulating it. Otherwise, how do you know? So they have Savior's Day every year in February, and it's a big event in Chicago, Illinois, United Snakes, and all of their membership come from all over, and they participate. And in 1985, their Savior's Day, they had a closed circuit activity where Muammar Gaddafi spoke to them via closed circuit. And during that event, he told them in Chicago that they should, any African in the US military here should leave the US military and create a military to overthrow this government. And if you go on YouTube, you can see videos of this, and these news commentators, all these people, politicians here went crazy. Oh, how he's a terrorist. How can he say that? The minute you hearing that, you're thinking the same thing, because that's how you're conditioned. Oh, he's a terrorist. He wants to overthrow the US government. But you believe that, but you don't think twice about the fact the US goes to other countries all the time and does that. Every day they do that. And you don't call the US government a terrorist government. They do the exact same thing that they called him a terrorist for doing. They have the US Information Agency. They have Radio Marti. They beam messages to the Cuban people in Cuba as we speak right now, telling them to organize and overthrow their government and offering them support, material support, to help them do that. They've been doing that for 60 years, but you don't call them terrorists. So there's no basis in our minds for any of you to believe that Gaddafi's a terrorist. This is a question of people fighting for power and who is just and who's going to win. And so the US has dominated the world through its capitalist system, Europe, and Gaddafi and the Libyan Jamihiriya are fighting back against that. So they have every right to do that. Just like the US has sabotaged Nicaragua, sabotaged Venezuela, Bolivia, sabotage the Congo, sabotage Myanmar, sabotage Vietnam, sabotage Grenada. I mean, I can go on and on and on and on and on. And so, you know, this is just trying to hopefully give you folks a chance to see it from a different perspective. We got, boy, it's a bunch of white supremacists they really want to hear about this lesson of Muammar Gaddafi. They don't understand that, you know, we do our research too, so we know who some of them are too. So there's other people in here that are legitimate. We'll let them in, but we'll just kind of leave the white supremacists out there. White supremacists, y'all can tune in on Facebook. You can watch that way. We're not gonna let you in though. All right, so glad you want to know about the Libyan Jamihiriya though. You should want to know. All right, so again, Libya did more than just provide material support for liberation movements. They also served as a hub in which liberation movements could organize around. And they did that by forming what they call the Mathaba. And the Mathaba, which was formed, I believe, 1991, was an international organization that was designed to provide support for liberation movements of colonized people. And this was extremely significant because at that time, the main liberation organizing network in the world was the Communist International, which was controlled by the Soviet Union. Well, for those of us who had different ideologies and objectives than just, Soviet socialism or, Stalinism or Leninism or any of those things, there wasn't really a place for us in these internationals. So the Libyan Jamihiriya, seeing that, initiated the Mathaba, and the Mathaba served as a place where the Palestinian organizations could go. They couldn't go to the Communist Internationals, where the All African People's Revolutionary Party could go, where the American Indian movement could go. And what the Mathaba would do was award money to the liberation movements. They would give, the one year they gave $1 million to the Palestinian struggle. And then another year they awarded it to the American Indian movement, although I don't believe they ever actually got the money because of some internal contradictions that were happening at that time. But that was the basis of the Mathaba, was to provide support for liberation movements around the world. So as you can see, Libya was really in the mix in terms of standing up to international imperialism. And it was for that reason that, imperialism decided they had to go. But it's difficult to do that when a country has popular support. That's why they haven't been able to do much in Cuba. They attempted to assassinate Fidel Castro, even the CIA says 600 times. So if the CIA says they tried to kill him 600 times, you can bet they probably tried about 5,000 times and they weren't successful. Why? Because the masses of support for people in Cuba for the Cuban Revolution. And I know some of you, that's difficult because that goes against everything you've ever heard, but you don't have the positioning that we have. Like in 1994, when I was in Cuba, you saw the 200 people building rafts trying to get here from Cuba. You didn't see the 50,000 people on the beachfront Malecón in Havana, where I was, because I was there, who had signs telling them, get the hell out of here. We don't want you here. Get out, go to America. That's where you should go. Because they had, this is not me, this is what their signs said. They had signs calling the people whores, and they're like, it's a whore country, so that's where you should go. So you didn't see that. So you don't understand that context that exists. You don't get, you think it's just the 200 people trying to get away on rafts and everybody wants to get away because they don't like Cuban socialism. But but as soon as there's a power outage in any city in this country, what happens? People start going in the stores and taking stuff, but you don't, for some strange reason, you don't see that as, well, that's the example people are against capitalism. If you're gonna see people building boats to get away from Cuba as them being against socialism, why wouldn't you see people going in stores taking stuff in this country as they're against capitalism? I mean, that's just an interesting observation. So Libya was in the eye of the storm because of the work that they were doing around the world. And so upset about this, their open support for revolutionary movements, their revolutionary example in Libya, the US used really sketchy intel. They finally had what they thought was the smoking gun, this Lockerbie air flight from Scotland in 1988 that was shot down. And they blamed this on Libya. Now, to them, again, this was the smoking gun. And what happened as a result of that is it gave the US the opportunity to pressure its allies in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Britain, France, Germany, etc., the Zionist state of Israel. And they were able to impose these sanctions against Libya. And sanctions are the death knell of a country, because what they do is they create a situation. They've done it against North Korea. They've had a 60-year economic blockade against Cuba, 60-year. So what sanctions do is they make it so that none of these, they pressure all these countries that produce all these products. They make it so they cannot do business with you. And so it makes it very difficult for you become isolated politically and economically. You cannot find food. You can't find food trade partners for food. You can't find anything. And because of the fall of the Soviet Union, that option was no longer there. And so Libya was completely isolated. And this created a situation for the Libyan Jamihiriya where, for their very survival, they made the decision that they had to negotiate with the imperialists so that, they weren't wiped out at that time during the 90s. And so they pulled back on a lot of their revolutionary support and activities during that time. But what they didn't do, and I know this is hard to see, but it says Libya's contribution. What they didn't do is stop in their development in Africa, okay? And so despite the sanctions, which as we're saying, were a death note from the 1980s through the early 2000s, Libya continued to try to build infrastructure in Africa. And if you know anything about Africa, Central America, South America, the Caribbean, Asia, the problem in most of these countries that I just named is they lack infrastructure. And the reason why they lack infrastructure is not because the people are lazy, they don't believe in the right God, or all this backward reactionary stuff that people in this country believe. It's because these imperialist countries have robbed them blind. And, as Shakura mentioned during her part of the presentation, and we've talked about it, we've talked about this until we can't hardly speak anymore during these seminars. So if you've done any of this, you should know that this entire economy is based on theft of resources from other countries. That's the definition of imperialism, right? It's stealing another country's resources. And so because this is the reality, that's why all of these countries, we gave the example of how Chevron controlled all of the oil in Libya. And we could give you examples all over Africa like that. And so this creates this poverty that exists in Africa and all throughout the world. That's the only reason it exists. It's not because they don't work hard. Trust me, people in Africa work harder in 2 hours of the day than you work in a whole week. 2 hours of the day they work. You can get up at 5 a.m. and you can go to the bus depots, and then Shakura's shaking her head because she's been over there, she's seen it. And you can go to the bus depots and there are 7,000 to 8,000 people there trying to get on buses so that they can get out and find work. Every day, this is what the people do. 12, 13, 14, 15-hour work days every day, selling food at the side of the road, making shoes, selling them, whatever way they can earn a living. So, if you don't want to get cussed out, don't tell me, well, they're poor because they don't believe, have more faith in God and their pinky nail than you ever had your whole life. And so don't tell me that they're poor because they don't have the right faith and they don't work hard. That has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with imperialism and the theft of resources, human and material. And so Libya was doing quite a bit to challenge that and to ensure that this challenge was met and that they could create resources to build infrastructure in Africa. And one of the most outstanding things of the 20th century, that's no exaggeration, that Libya was able to accomplish despite these sanctions that were imposed against them that made economic development very difficult for them, is that they still focused on this economic development in Africa. And so they created what's called the Great Man-Made River Project. It started in 1984. And what it was is that they built a network of fresh water pipes all throughout Libya leading into the Sahara Desert, right? And so what this did, you all, is it was 1,700, thousands of miles of pipes of fresh water. They created a system of potable water throughout Africa, throughout this Sahara Desert region, for people who previously had no access to fresh water. This is millions of people who benefited from this project. And they called it the Nubian Sandstorm Aquifer System. It carried water to up to 1,800 miles and created the longest aqueducts in the world to supply water to all the regions around the Sahara Desert. So if you want to understand Now, Shakura was a child, but when we went to Ghana the first time in 1991, she was 4 years old. And at that time, the U.S. was at war against Iraq. And so, you know, we were talking to people, and I realized then that the most popular man in Africa at that time, and it never changed, was not Nelson Mandela, as most of you probably have guessed, because he had just gotten out of prison. And we actually saw Nelson Mandela while we were there in Ghana, because he was in Ghana just at the same time we were. And they had a parade, and he was actually only like, what, about 30 feet from us? Yeah, we have a picture of it, of him there. He was in a caravan with Rawlings, who was then the leader of Ghana. But anyway, the point is that the most popular man in Africa was Muammar Gaddafi, hands down. And even today, if you went to the Sahara Desert countries who are surrounded by the Sahara Desert, you can do this yourself and do the research. Like, I'm talking about Chad, Niger, the Sudan, and ask the people there what they thought about Gaddafi. Ask them what they thought. This is the man in the system that provided potable water for them so that they could raise their families in a healthy environment. The U.S. didn't do that. The U.S. did nothing for them. So this man, regardless of what you think, what you heard on Fox News or CNN or CIA or whatever people here watch, this man was the most popular man in Africa, you all, because of what he was doing to create self-determination on the African continent. And so the last thing that he did before we talk about the results of what Obama did is he and the Libyan Jamihiriya were interested in really creating self-determination in Africa. So if you know anything about African currency today, so imperialist currency dominates world economic markets, right? The US dollar, because Tanzania is still unfortunately controlled through neo-colonialism by imperialism. So these are the currencies that are dominant. The euro, these are the currencies that are dominant in the world today. So African currencies are, you know, virtually worthless compared to those currencies I just mentioned. Like if you go to Senegal, the currency in Senegal is the CFA. And if you go to Gambia, which is the country right next door, and I've done this, you know, caught a ferry on the Gambian River and went to Gambia, the currency in Gambia is the Dalasi. So a CFA is worthless in Gambia, and a Dalasi is worthless in Senegal. You may as well just give the money to someone, and, you know, just because it's not going to help you in the next country. That's how worthless this money, that's how worthless it is. Would y'all tell your white supremacist friends they're not getting in today? They got to read tell them to read the Green Book if they want to know something about the Libyan Jamihiriya. Tell them to read that. You know, they're not getting in this seminar because they don't know how to act. If they weren't so primitive, because I'm not opposed to them, because, you know, the fact that they're coming here wanting to get into our session, that means we have the power. They don't have to worry about me going to any white supremacist sessions. So they're coming, that's not going to happen. So they always try to come to our stuff. So why do I need to be concerned? So yeah, if they knew how to act, we would be happy to educate them. But since they don't, they're not coming in. So this creation of the diner, which was going to be backed by Libyan gold, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for imperialism. Because what that would have done is changed the situation I just described, where African currency has no basis and no strength in the world. And it would have created a currency that would have been competitive against the imperialist currencies I mentioned a little bit ago. And you know, international capitalism, imperialism, they can't have that. That would have changed the whole game on the international market. Africa having economic sovereignty and self-determination, that would mean life here would cease as you know it. Since this entire economy is based on the current reality that exploits Africa for US imperialism and European imperialism and Zionist imperialism. So they have to stop that. So they that's when they went to work, and they again brought up this Lockerbie situation, and they used cover of the so-called Arab Spring. Now, a lot of you all were like, it's a revolution, the Arab Spring revolution. And that's because people don't know what revolution is. And they thought what was happening in Egypt. Now today, that was 2011. Today, what has changed for the better in Egypt from the so-called Arab Spring revolution? What's changed? What's changed? Ask women, Egyptian women, what's gotten better for them. Ask Tunisian women what's gotten better. So that tells you that's not a revolution. You could ask Cuban women what's gotten better for them, and they could tell you what's gotten better for them in their revolution. But in those countries I just named, it's worse for them today. So because we don't know, they lumped Libya in that, and imperialism used it as a cover to attack the Libyan Jamihiriya. The people of Libya want to engage in this uprising to overthrow this dictator, Muammar Gaddafi. Some of you listening to this believe that. And so they were able to use that as a cover. And so they used the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is all the imperialist countries, their alliance, and they bombed Libya into submission. And this was on the orders of Barack Obama. And if you want to know the only significance of Hillary Clinton's 30,000 emails, is that those emails contain all of this that I'm telling you about. They contain all of the orders that came out, all of the things that happened, and how it happened, and why it happened, and who ordered it. And because of that, even Obama has come out now and said, well, the thing I regret most is what happened in Libya. You know, I mean, that's like, and some of you that love Obama, you're like, well, he said he was sorry, but that's like if he raped your children and killed them and said, well, I regret that happened. That wouldn't hold any balance for you. You wouldn't feel any better about the situation. Well, you have to understand that for us, Africa is our mother. It's our homeland. And Libya was the shining light in Africa. So this is the fact that you apologize after you've destroyed the country is unacceptable to us. You know, you want to get on there like y'all, you know, so George Floyd gets killed and Obama is on there talking about, this is terrible, Yeah, okay, that's terrible that one person got killed, and nobody clearly has to explain that to me, but I don't need to hear that from you. You're responsible for millions of us getting killed through your military industrial complex. Y'all, I don't understand why y'all can't see that. Like, it's all you got to do is look at it. It's there. It's irrefutable. So this picture you have here is a picture of Libya today. Okay, and what's happening is that you hear all these people that don't read talking about, well, the Arabs are attacking Black people in Libya. No, that's not, yes, that's true, but it's much deeper than that. What's happening, I told you, Gaddafi comes from the Bedouin Desert, which is the Black region of Libya. It was the basis of support for the Jamahiriya. These people who formed this so-called transitional council, which are these thieves, these crooks, and these scum that allied themselves with US imperialism to overthrow the Jamahiriya and take over Libya. That's who you see in the picture, who's represented there. And they're punishing the people who supported Gaddafi. That's what's happening now. So yes, the Black, quote unquote, Black people in Libya have been under siege for the last 9 years because they were the people who supported the Libyan Jamahiriya. And because of that, these people who want to control Libya and have alliance with imperialism and bring Chevron back into Libya, they're punishing these people for that. So this is what you have to understand about what's happening now. If you're going to talk, well, they got slavery in Libya. Yeah, that's because of US imperialism and European imperialism. That's why that's happening. So the African Command, or AFRICOM, is the program that started under George W. Bush to create military installations in Africa, but it proliferated under Obama. It hasn't even continued at the same level under this idiot that's there now. So Obama was the chief architect of AFRICOM, and it was through AFRICOM that the overthrow of Libya was commandeered. So this is why you wonder, why are they talking against Obama? He's the first African-American president, and they're African-Americans, so they should be proud of his achievement. No, because like Chuck D rapped in Welcome to the Terror Dome, every brother ain't a brother because a black hand squeezed the Malcolm X the man. So some of us are a little more analytical than that. And just because somebody looks like us, that does not make them our friend. If they don't represent the same interests that we want to represent, which is the interests of the masses of people in humanity. And by the same token, just because someone does not look like us does not make them our enemy. There are plenty of white people who are comrades, family, allies, people. I would give my life for them. If it was them standing there and Obama standing there and it was a bomb falling, I would rush to the best of my ability and dive and save that white person who was a family member and an ally to people's liberation. And I would hope the bomb falls on that other clown and eliminates at least that level of imperialism in our lives. So you wonder, well, how could you say that? Well, you haven't been paying attention for the last 50 some odd minutes, because this is what we're talking to you about. Is if you want to talk about a legacy of Barack Obama, here it is right here. Here it is right here. This is what we're talking about. So without question, without Obama, there would have been no capacity to destroy Libya. And if Libya had, when they bombed the submission out of Libya, all these aqueducts were destroyed. There's now no more potable water around the Sahara Desert. This is, and clearly there's no one African currency. So the way they took out Libya, the way your boy Obama took out Libya, this set Africa back decades, you all, decades it set Africa back. And so this is why we talk like this. This is why we believe like this. And so, you know, we're not asking you to, you don't have to accept what we're saying about it. We're just asking you to do the research so you can understand what's going on, because today Libya is in absolute chaos. And even a lot of the people who were fooled, because when they have sanctions, one of the things they do is they, you know, it's so people are hungry. So they start saying, yeah, maybe Gaddafi should go, because if he goes, the sanctions will go. And so a lot of those people who felt that way, now they're talking about, we wish Gaddafi was still here because our lives are miserable now. And y'all got to understand, your tax dollars paid for everything we just got through talking about this hour. And maybe you're cool with that, but I'm not cool with that. I don't want my tax. I want my money to go. I'll pay as many taxes as needed to make sure children are properly fed, educated, that people on the streets have a place to live, that women are safe and not subjected to domestic violence, that LGBTQ people are not faced against discrimination, that my African family is not gunned down on the streets and subject to institutionalized discrimination, that the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere get their stuff. I pay as many taxes as possible, but I know that none of that is going to come from me paying taxes. It's going to come from us organizing and doing what we do. So this is where your tax dollars go. And when somebody asks you, well, if you have health care for all, how are you going to pay for it? Well, don't do this kind of sabotage against the world community, and then you'd have the money. Because if you didn't have AFRICOM, the US military budget is half of the tax revenues produced in this country. And you can't even tell me what the US military is doing. This is what they're doing, you all. This is what they're doing. So when we come on here and we say, those are not our heroes, and you get offended, that's because you have diarrhea in your brain and you don't understand what's happening around the world. We travel the world. We've been in it. We've seen this suffering. We're not relying on CIA network to give us our information. So that's why we talk like that. So we're saying that this is a direct result of this empire and Obama. So, you know, the final analysis is that, again, I'm going to ask you all this. If you had the opportunity to engage in a life mission, and you had the ability to have all the resources to do it, and it would solve all the problems in the world, then would you do that? And I think most of you are, I mean, some of the white supremacists might be listening on Facebook. Some of the police might be listening. So we're not talking to you all. We know you all are scum. But for the rest of you all, I'm sure that you are legitimately sincere people for the forward progress of humanity. And so with that being said, I know that you would say, yes, I would do that. So then if that's true, you know, our question is, why aren't you in organizations working to make all of that happen? Because there can only be a few reasons why. One, you either think that you know enough, and so therefore you don't have to link with anybody else because, you know, you just are ahead of all the rest of us, and that you just somehow through osmosis, I guess, figure out a way to convince people what needs to be done. If it's not that, it has to be that you just really don't care about any of this stuff, you know, other than you just want to be knowledgeable about it, but you're really not at the point where you want to do anything to change it. Or it must be that you are, at least on some level, in unity with the system that's creating this suffering around the world. And you have just made a decision that you're going to stand with the system of imperialism. It has to be one of those three things. So what we're saying, we're not judging anybody, but what we're saying is we're just asking you to consider that if we had the ability to make sure this information we've gone over the last almost hour was known to people, then these things couldn't happen the way they happen. And if they couldn't happen, we would still have millions of people with potable water around the Sahara Desert. We would still have, we would have an African currency that would raise the standard for the African continent. You should want that. You should want people to have a raised standard. I mean, you're able to put gas in your car because of Africa being exploited. You're able to drive a car because of Africa being exploited. You're able to wear jewelry because of Africa being exploited. You're able to listen to me right now on your device because of Africa being exploited. So you should at least want them to have the ability to determine their own lives. So the only way that's going to happen is we got to get more people involved. And by involved, we mean in organizations, political education, organizing, putting a challenge against the system to change. So we just ask you to, you know, really seriously consider getting engaged. Figure out how you can do it. I'm going to dedicate 1 hour a week to organizing work. Hey, we'll take it. That'd be wonderful. 1 hour a week. That's not even a football game on a Sunday or a basketball game, or it's not even, it's just one episode of your favorite show on Netflix or whatever, just 1 hour. That's all you got to do. And if you did that, I mean, even if you took 1 hour and you made calls for an organization, you could call even the slowest person on the phone could call 15 people in an hour, 10 people, that's 10 people an hour. That's 40 people a month that you're letting know. Like if you want people to know about this seminar, that's 40 people a month you're letting people know. That's helpful. So that's all we're asking you to do is consider that. Consider doing that. And so we want to ask you, you know, if you want to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, please go to the site. No one's done it yet. No, that's not true. A few people have done it. But we're having an orientation tomorrow. So if you want to participate, you don't have to join, but you don't even have to be African to attend an orientation. But if you just want to, I want to know more about what the All African People's Revolutionary Party is about. They mentioned a little bit, but I think they lying. I don't think it's real. I just don't believe it. So I would like to know more so I can see if they lying or not. So that's fine. So I encourage you if you want to do that. The first site is our international site. So contact that site if you want to join. But if you want to like participate in our orientation tomorrow, you're welcome to my blog site, www.betterworld.me. Reach out. Please don't wait. The orientation, I'm trying to think because I'm on Central Time right now. The orientation is 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Okay. So if you want to know how to get in, I can't broadcast it here because we got white supremacists, you know. But But if you want to know how to get in, reach out through abetterworld.me and I'll let you go. But please don't wait till 12:30 Pacific time, because I'm not going to be looking at them. I'm getting prepared to do the work. So, give me time to get back to you. And I'd love to have you participate and you can learn about what our party is doing. And if you have some other organization and you want help in how to facilitate that organization, let us know. I'm talking about like if you want to build political education process, you want to do that, let us know. We can help you with that. If you want to start an organization and you are serious about wanting to start something, then let us know. We can do that. And so also there's the hoodcommunist.org, which is a collection of African revolutionaries that write. And we ask you to support that because that's a wonderful thing. And I get the privilege and opportunity to participate. So I think at that point, I'm trying to see if there's any comments here. There's an announcement. I'm going to announce it. There's a National Day of Action from our comrades from the Black Alliance for Peace. Shut down AFRICOM on October 1st. You should go there. You can go online and get information about that. The demand is a total elimination of AFRICOM, and that's exactly what we need. We need AFRICOM to go away. It's a very negative thing, and you shouldn't want your money going towards it. I don't want mine going towards it. So yes, please look that up. The Shutdown AFRICOM, October 1st. Look that up and support that event. Black Alliance for Peace. They're a wonderful organization that we support wholeheartedly, and you should join the Black Alliance for Peace. You should join the NAACP. Well, I don't want to join NAACP because they're not militant. Well, you ain't either, so then that's fine. It should be a great match for you. You should join the Nation of Islam. I don't want to join them because they anti-Semitic and I like bacon too much. Okay, well then you should join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. I don't want to join that because y'all socialists and I'm capitalist, even though my bank account is overdrawn and has been for weeks. Okay, well then start the I Wish He Would Shut Up organization and organize that organization right now for liberation and justice. There's no other option, you all. That's what you got to do if you're serious about addressing these problems. Like, I don't know about you, but this makes me sick what happened to Libya. I've been sick for 9 years about what happened to Libya. I've come to tears. I'm ready to come to tears now because I know the suffering that people are enduring. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. Trust me, it is happening. People are suffering. And they don't hate you because you're in the US. They just don't understand why you allow this to happen. When I go to Africa, that's all. Why did they let this happen like this? That's all people want to know. And that's a question you got to ask yourself. Why do you let it happen? When we know what we need to do to stop it and we won't do it, then at some point it's our fault. We're just as guilty. So that's the message for today. And the Libyan people will rise again. Africa will rise. The Palestinian people will rise. Ireland will be free. The Philippines will be free. And the Western Hemisphere will be returned to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And legitimate working class white people will be liberated from this capitalist lie that your lives are the same as the capitalist system. All of that is going to happen. It's just a question of how fast, and that'll be determined by how long it takes us to get involved. So we thank you all for being with us this week. We'll be back next week with another topic, another hot topic that we'll go over. And I'm so glad to be able to be here with Shakura. I'm just glad to look at you. Just say something to the people.
I just thank you all so much, and join an organization working for justice that also has a community defense so that you can have political education.
Right.
Thank you and be safe.
Right. Even this puppy knows that she got to be organized. She understands we already had organizing. We're going to have an organized conversation too as we get through here. So you all have a great rest of your evening. Forward ever, backwards never. We appreciate you. Stay strong. Join an organization working for justice.
Do you want me to go in the other room so I can call you?